You'll hear people talking about how something's evolved, simply meaning how it has changed. However, when we speak about biological evolution, we are speaking about something very specific. Evolution is one of science's most fascinating discoveries. Learning about evolution can change how you feel about your place in the world, as it explores our origins and our connection to all other living things on Earth. A lot has changed since Charles Darwin first published his theory of evolution, and some misunderstandings and misconceptions remain. With that in mind, here are 10 things you should know about evolution. 1. Evolution is not just a theory. This misconception arises from the common everyday use of the word theory, meaning a guess, like in the sentence, "I have a theory that John fancies Susan." A scientific theory, however, is something quite different. The dictionary describes a theory as a set of ideas designed to explain something. A scientific theory is not just a single sentence with someone saying, "This is what I think," but it is also backed up with well thought out proposals. A scientific theory also needs to be falsifiable. That means it needs to make predictions which can prove it right or prove it false. For example, with Einstein's theory of general relativity, he predicted what you would be able to observe due to mass warping space, such as a light getting bent round a large mass. This prediction was tested and was proven to be right. Similarly, the theory of evolution makes predictions which have also been shown to be right, and with very little evidence against evolution, it has moved into the realm of science fact, just like the theory of gravity. 2. Evolution does not explain the origins of life on Earth. This misconception possibly arises from the title of the landmark work in evolution, On the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. Darwin's theory of evolution does not explain how life originated on Earth, but it does explain how species can change and adapt over time, and how new species can arise from existing species through a process called natural selection. Humans used to think that everything we could see in the natural world had been designed and created in just that way. Millions of years ago, however, the world and living things on it looked very different. Over a long period of time, tiny organisms, animals and plants have been changing and adapting, leading up to the species that we see today. After travelling the world and documenting in great detail lots of different animals and collecting fossils, Charles Darwin spent a further 20 years researching and writing on the origin of species. When it was published in 1859, DNA had not yet been discovered. In fact, it wouldn't be discovered for a further 10 years after that, and not understood for a further 80 years after that. So Darwin wrote about what he believed to be how species changed through natural selection, but missing out the information on a key point of evolution. 3. Evolution is a genetic change. Humans are changing constantly throughout our lives, sometimes even from day to day, but this is not biological evolution. Even the change in life expectancy of humans over the past 100 years, from 30 to 40 years 100 years ago to now 70 to 80 years today, is not biological evolution. This is due to better nutrition and better medical care. Your body contains DNA inside all of its cells. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. This DNA contains all of the information it needs to build you, and almost all living things on Earth contain DNA. Sometimes when this DNA is replicating in a new organism, there is a genetic mutation leading to a change in appearance or a change in behaviour. For example, a brown bear might give birth to a white bear, an elephant might give birth to a hairy baby, and sometimes there might be no noticeable changes at all. However, where there is a noticeable change in behaviour or appearance, natural selection can then start taking place. 4. Evolution can be a non-random process. Here, by non-random, I don't mean that it follows a plan, but that an animal's survival and reproduction chances have increased due to a genetic mutation. Natural selection dictates that a genetic mutation must have an advantage for a creature in terms of survival and reproduction, for these stronger genes to be able to spread out throughout the species, while weaker genes disappear from the species. Since the successful reproduction of these genes is as a result of the animal being better suited to its environment and not just left to chance, that is why it is referred to as a non-random process. Take, for example, a family of brown bears who migrate to live in a colder climate where it snows. One of these brown bears gives birth to a bear cub which has a genetic mutation meaning it has white fur. This white fur allows that bear cub to be able to better hide from its prey in the snow, and therefore it catches more food than the brown bears. With more food comes more power and a better chance of attracting a mate and reproducing and passing these genes for white fur down onto the next generation of bears. That was an example of a genetic mutation resulting in the natural selection process giving rise to polar bears. Over time, the organisms of a species will gradually change and become more and more suited to their environment, making it look like they were designed to be there, whereas in fact they have been sculpted by natural selection. 5. Evolution can be a random process. I've just spoken about how natural selection is a non-random process due to the increased survivability and reproduction chances of an animal of a species. Natural selection is not the only evolutionary process that is ongoing though. Every individual contains 2 copies of the same gene. Sometimes these copies are identical, sometimes they are different. A child gets 1 copy of a gene from their dad and 1 copy of their gene from their mum. So if these 2 genes are different within the dad or different within the mum, there's only a 50% chance that the child will get one of these genes. Let's return to the example I was just looking at with bears. A white male bear will contain 2 genes for fur colour. One of these genes might be for white fur and the other one might be for brown fur. When that bear finds itself a mate, it only has a 50% chance of passing on that gene for white fur, meaning that its child might not have white fur, it might actually come out with brown fur. Therefore, that white male bear would need to have lots of children to increase the chances of that white fur gene being passed down into other bears. This also means there is a possibility that that white fur gene could disappear entirely. This random walk of genes from parents to their offspring is known as genetic drift. Sometimes genes can become completely locked into a species and sometimes they can disappear entirely. Because of this random element, it doesn't matter how advantageous a genetic mutation is, there is still the chance that it could disappear entirely, and that is why evolution also has a random element to it. 6. The arrangement of life was recognised long before Darwin. When biologists started classifying plants and animals, starting in 1735, they noticed that they fell into natural classifications. What was more eye-opening, however, was that biologists working independently of each other came up with the same classifications. This showed that it was not something in the way that humans were choosing to classify them, but something in the natural order that would not be understood until Darwin came along. Classifications of species fall into a nested pattern. To understand this, let's look at an example. Fish, amphibians, humans and reptiles are all vertebrates, meaning they are all animals with a backbone. This also means that they all share a common ancestor who also had a backbone. Reptiles and humans are more closely connected, however, because they both produce amniotic eggs, meaning they have a more recent ancestor between them who also produced amniotic eggs. These 2 species then separate, with mammals being warm-blooded, having hair and producing milk, while reptiles are cold-blooded, scaly and have watertight eggs. This nesting pattern would continue if you were to work through the different species of mammals, seeing the relationships between them and looking at their common ancestry. This natural classification does not appear when organising other objects. For example, if you were asked to organise books onto a bookshelf, you might start with the tallest books. Then, within that, you might look at the colour of the spine of each book. And then within that, you might look at the year the book was published. Somebody else who was asked to organise the same books would come up with their own pattern. There is no natural way to organise the books onto the bookshelf. This natural classification pattern for plants and animal species is strong evidence for evolution, and it is what Darwin's theory of evolution predicted would be seen. 7. Evolution takes place over a long period of time. It takes many generations, that is from birth to fully grown, for evolutionary change to take place. This can be hundreds, thousands, sometimes even millions of years, depending on the species and the change taking place. Some microorganisms, such as bacteria and viruses, have very short generations, sometimes as short as 20 minutes, meaning they can undergo a lot of evolutionary change in a short period of time. A lot of us will be familiar with this due to the recent COVID-19 pandemic and the different evolved versions of that virus. Populations are evolving all of the time. As we've seen, evolution has a random element to it with what genes get passed on and what genes might end up disappearing entirely. Also, no organism ever perfectly replicates DNA, meaning there will be genetic mutations that can then be passed on to future generations, leading to this biological evolutionary change. Some genes will thrive, some genes will disappear, and when species migrate to different areas, they will evolve differently. Evolution tends to work faster when natural selection is a process that is driving it, but once species are very well adapted for the environment they are in, the evolutionary process tends to slow down. 8. Humans did not evolve from monkeys. You might have heard people saying that humans evolved from monkeys, and other people asking why, if humans evolved from monkeys, are there still monkeys? This is because humans did not evolve from monkeys, but we do share a common ancestor. To understand this, we need to look at something known as speciation. Put simply, speciation just means the evolution of two species which can't interbreed. That means they can't mix their genes. Take, for example, a species of reptile that is living in two different population groups. Because these two population groups end up living in different areas, they evolve in different ways. Over time, and remember, evolution can take place over a very long time, these two species will have evolved to a point where they can interbreed. This might just be because they don't find the member of the other species attractive, or the young that they would have end up being sterile, so this reproduction process goes nowhere. As for humans, we share a common ancestor with monkeys that was living in different population groups and evolved in different ways. Humans have a more recent common ancestor with the great apes, which are gorillas, bonobos, chimpanzees and orangutans, and along with humans, we make up the 5 great apes. Of these apes, humans also have a more recent common ancestor with chimpanzees. Humans share 99% of their DNA with that of chimpanzees, meaning that they are our cousins and our closest living relatives within the animal kingdom. 9. Humans bear the stamp of our lowly origins. Within our bodies, there is evidence that we evolved from ancient ancestors when we look and compare across the animal kingdom. And this is what Darwin meant when he said that humans bear the stamp of our lowly origins. As an intelligent species, it can be easy to look down on other species within the animal kingdom, but we all evolved from the same starting point billions of years ago. Evolution can't create things from scratch, it can only work with what's already there, and that is why we have this evidence for our evolutionary path. All creatures with limbs, whether that is wings, flippers, legs or arms, share an identical bone structure. A single bone joins with 2 bones, then some small blobs of bone, then to the digits. In a human arm, this would be the humerus to the radius and ulna. That's a 1 bone, 2 bone pattern, which is also found in seals, lizards, penguins, humpback whales, theropod dinosaurs, birds, bats, and pterosaurs, to name but a few. In humans, our arms end with 5 fingers. Other animals with 5-finger bone structure include, but are not limited to, lizards, cats, whales, bats, frogs, and birds. There are a lot more examples of our evolutionary timeline contained within our bodies, even connections to our fish ancestors, but there's just not enough time to put them all in this video. I'm even missing out one of my favourites, which is a left recurrent laryngeal nerve, so this is research you will need to do for yourself. 10. A lot has changed since Darwin's day. I mentioned near the start of the video how when Darwin developed his theory of evolution, DNA had not yet been discovered. Darwin understood how small alterations could lead to big changes over a long period of time, and also how life fell into a natural nested pattern or tree of life. Since then, we have gained a great understanding of DNA, genetic mutation and environmental impacts. The extent and limitations of evolution are also much better understood, and a lot of fossils have been discovered and continue to be discovered, which help fill in some of the missing links. Gradually, piece by piece, we are putting together the evolutionary picture of life on Earth as each new jigsaw piece is slotted into place. Unfortunately, an organism needs to die and have its body lie in a particular way for it to be fossilised. This means that not all species will be fossilised, but also over the time frame from that species being fossilised until now, a lot of fossils will have been destroyed by natural or man-made causes. This means we may never find some of the missing links in this evolutionary tree of life, but there is still a lot of work to be done and a lot of research to be done to help gain even more understanding about life on Earth and this evolutionary process. There are two things to keep in mind at the end of this video. 1. As I've said, evolution takes place over a long period of time. The Earth formed around 4.5 billion years ago, with the first life appearing on Earth around 3.5 billion years ago. That means there has been a lot of time for species to rise, evolve and go extinct. In fact, 99% of all species that have ever lived on Earth have already gone extinct. It can be quite tricky to get your head around such big numbers and time frames, so let's take the entire history of the Earth, that 4.5 billion years, and shrink it down to one 24-hour day. In that time frame, humans would appear in the final 1 minute and 17 seconds of the day. For a more detailed look at the timeline of the Earth, I've done a video on this previously, so I'll put a link in the description for you to check that out. The second thing to keep in mind is that the study of DNA and evolution is not just good for understanding our origins and our connection to all other living things on Earth, but also helps us create medicines to fight against bacteria and viruses which, as we've seen, can have very rapid evolutionary processes. Our origins and the evolution of life on Earth are also of interest to astrobiologists, scientists who study life in space. By looking at how life might have originated on Earth and evolved into the various species that we have, they can get some ideas about how life might form and evolve on different planetary bodies within our solar system and beyond. Thank you for watching this Things You Should Know video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like and subscribe buttons to stay up to date on all future content. The majority of the information for this video came from Why Evolution is True by Jerry Coyne, Your Inner Fish by Neil Shubin, a blog post by paleoanthropologist John Hawkes, and a children's adaptation of On the Origin of Species by Sabina Radeva, which I highly recommend. You can subscribe to the channel by pushing the button here, and I've added links here to the STEM demonstrations and explanation videos I do, and then down at the bottom to my STEM career interviews and to my other Things You Should Know videos. This has been STEM with Mr. N with 10 things you should know about evolution.